Hello, everyone. I'm very happy to be back here today, and I hope that you get a few things done during your time listening to Homemakers Radio. I developed this so that you would have a chance to listen while you worked and you wouldn't have to watch anything. But before you go, I would like to show you my teacup for the day that I'm using, and kind of goes with the decor around here right now. And this is by Stitch called Gracie Bone China. You can get this at Home Goods for about $6.99, and you can get it on the web. It doesn't have a name, but this is what I'll be using all day, and it's just so nice. It has that gold on it, gold plating on it, and it's not dishwasher safe, but you can and you can't use it in a microwave or anything like that. But it's just lovely. And ladies, I also want to encourage you to do something about your appearance before anything, and that is the one of the most important things in becoming in charge, feeling like you have a goal and a purpose in your home. Many people are home now, and they're finding out that home, the way that it's run, the way that it looks, the way that you feel while you're there, that your life at home means everything, and that life out there actually doesn't have as great of a impact on us. And in fact, things are changing so much that we're going to find out that we do a lot of things at home. Home is a base for even people who earn a living, are earning a living at home. And so that's why I say get up and get dressed and do your absolute very best to look good. You can always put an apron over something nice. If you're not comfortable with that, you can do what I do. I put on my plaid shirt and my black corduroy skirt and my boots, and do some of the harder work of scrubbing and gardening and things like that. But I dressed up to come to see you today. And sometimes maybe you'd like to just dress up and come to your class. This is your Thrive class. I challenged everyone at the beginning of this captivity. I guess it's been 2 years now, hasn't it? And I said, let's come out on the other side of it stronger, healthier, smarter, closer to God, and more creative, and having better kept homes, having learned something, taken classes and courses, and just happier. Sometimes it can be a blessing. Remember, when Joseph was put into captivity, he said to his brothers when he finally met up with them again, what you meant for evil, God meant for good. You can turn this around, and the challenge is to overcome. And when you have that word overcome, it just means to overwhelm, go beyond. You don't just put up with something. You don't just wait to be released. You learn as you are there, and you take the circumstances and do the absolute best you can. Sometimes I think a lot of us are going to come out better off, because we don't have all that stress of the commercial world. And so I realize that we need to be sympathetic with those who are having a very difficult time. It is not easy, but let's get the better of it. And I heard someone say the other day they're just getting sick and tired of this, and I said I am too, but I'm not going to let it overtake me. I am going to beat them at their own game. And so I am going to have all my housework done the way I want it done, instead of always playing catch up and trying to rush through it because I've lost so much time having to go somewhere else, do something else. And so that's one of my goals. I'm still working on a couple of areas. And so I'd just like to tell you that one of the ways that I overcame it was to keep a master list, just this long list. It didn't have to be in any order. I tried to go room by room. And we've learned a lot on some of our Thrive classes. And I'd like to share some of that with you. I have a Thrive class with my descendants and some of my friends, and some of the ideas they have come up with to keep the house in order and going. would be just very inspirational to you. So I want to share some of that. I hope I can this time. And so I was listening to someone talk about, it was I couldn't even tell you who it was, but it was on YouTube, and it was someone talking about how they had uh, used to make speeches about freedom and about how our freedom was being eroded, and how there was a group of people who thought they were special, that thought that mankind couldn't control himself and had to be in control of a government all the time. And he said he'd get several people coming to his meetings, and maybe one would talk to him, but most of the time they would tell him that he was a conspiracy theorist. And let me tell you, when someone calls you a conspiracy theorist, you are pretty close to some truth. That's just a way of intimidating people. And I was called a conspiracy theorist years ago when I began homeschooling, and a lot of you have put up with that too. And in fact, even trying to make my own clothes and prepare my own, grow my own food and prepare it myself. You're told that you are just too suspicious, and not everybody's out to get you, that kind of thing. And but this whole thing, this captivity, has brought such challenges that we can all rise to meet them and overcome them and come out on the other side better. In fact, I've met several people who have developed businesses that are different and that were needed, services that were needed. But this one person I was listening to that was saying he would be called names, and he would be told he needed his head examined and he needed to be locked up, or someone needed to put him on medication or something. He says now he draws a crowd of 1,000, and then there's a long line afterwards of people who want to talk to him personally. So there are a lot of people who are feeling the same or who are waking up. And so he talks about different things like the opportunity to homeschool your children, and how this has also helped many of us to learn to do things, because we used to outsource everything. We've outsourced our health. And now we're learning about nutrition and rest and water, and because true health isn't just food and losing weight and that sort of thing, and being fit. It's not about, we used to, I think, be focused on the food part, but it's also about keeping stress out of your life. And I have noticed in the year, almost 1 year now, of being home in captivity, that some of that stress has dissipated. I did take one trip out to visit someone, and I felt some of it coming back. And so, there is something to that there is something out there that is stressing women, especially homemakers. God made us to be real sensitive to things. We pick up on things when something's not quite right. We kind of feel the atmosphere. And those of you who have raised children know that you'd get a feeling about some place and think, I think we probably shouldn't be here, or we should go home. And you could have the father or your husband with you, and he wouldn't feel anything. But women were made to discern things. They become more sensitive to things. We smell things. We see things, and we hear things that other people don't pick up. And it's possibly because we were created to protect our children, and also to take care of our husbands. And we see and detect things that maybe they in all their busyness don't see. And so I have noticed that it's been such a wonderful, calming experience, and I'm able to put my thoughts together a little better when I've been home so much. And I know that not everyone wants to do that. Now, I have never worn an mask, and I never will. And I think that has an effect on your health, even if it's just for a few minutes. I don't think it's natural. I don't think I've ever worn one in my whole life. And I don't know anybody else that hasn't. I would like to meet them if you know of anyone that just hasn't. And the one way that I got around all the requirements was just stay home. No one's going to require anything of me at home. And they can't yet get into my house. Now, we have a governor here in Oregon, and I don't want to distress too many people, but I got my ideas from her. She's decided that we can't go to church unless we have a certificate that we have had the jab. And so I got to thinking of something that I know that Oregon, and I've lived in Texas several times in my life. My father was born in Texas, and his family and all the generations lived in Vera, Texas farming community. And I got to thinking that if you look at Oregon and all the foreign countries that buy up farmland here and also have businesses and chain stores, that I really would like to invite anybody from Texas to colonize Oregon for us. Make us a colony of Texas, because Texas is the only one that I would admire enough in the way that they run their little country down there, their big country, that I would want to be a colony of. So if you want to come and bring all your businesses, buy up all the farmland, because after all, the foreigners are buying it up and they've colonized us, and bring your financing and your way of life up here and colonize us, and bring your churches and everything, and so we could be a colony of Texas. That's just my idea, and I got it from our governor, because she today created a new edict. She just right and left just says this or that. Those edicts are only supposed to last, a month? So she has to come out every now and then and redo something. And she's created a little rule. It's not a law. Laws have to be passed through the legislature. Take quite a while. They have to be voted on, they have to be spoken on, and the governors don't pass laws. They can only sign them or reject them. And so she said we can't go to church unless we have these cards that show proof of our compliance with the jab. And so one thing that I learned from homeschooling, I want to share it with you, and I hope you're busy working and that this is not going to be too disturbing. I know women especially need calm, and we need peace, and we need reassurance. It would be better if the men would tell us, don't worry about anything, I'm going to take care of everything. Because one of the reasons women are so sensitive and upset is they don't have great confidence that the men in their lives, and that the politicians and that the elected officials are actually going to do things that are right and that are safe, and it makes us anxious. And even in churches, it's that way too, as some of the churches get extremely way off on things. But one of the things that I learned that you can benefit from in this crazy situation is what I learned from homeschooling. We had a lot of contact and communication with the papers and the magazines that came out of the Homeschool Legal Defense Association and other leading homeschoolers who helped us in the 1980s get along with the government and with the public schools in our district. And that was, you don't bring attention to yourself. You don't call them out and say, oh, look at me, I'm in defiance and I am not going to obey your rules. And so I wanted to read to you something about it in the Bible on how I learned this. But I later on saw that the Homeschool Legal Defense recommended that you not bring attention to yourself. Just lie low, just stay home and quietly homeschool your children and be quiet. So see, I'm homeschooling you today. I'm going to do several lessons for you. So, and it takes a while. As someone who grew up in public school, I will tell you, it took me years to throw off the indoctrination from the public schools, and the way that they taught and the things that they taught, and just the vapid way of filling your mind full of nothing and social things. So that I would admire my father and mother. They could do so much, but they didn't spend 12 years in a public school. In those days, in the 1930s and 1940s, a child learned as much as he could. By the time they learned to read and write, they went off and did something else, and there was no requirement. And to teach school, all you had to do is pass a test to show that you could read and write and spell and add and subtract, etc. And it didn't loom as large. Education didn't loom as largely in their lives, but they were so proficient at so many things, and I wasn't, because I was away from them. I was in the public schools. So you have to lie low and be quiet. And so, like, I'm homeschooling you. Don't go around bragging that Mrs. Sherman is homeschooling you, because you might get targeted, or I might get targeted. They don't like competition, these people and these institutions. They don't like competition. So you don't go to a public school and say, if you're taking your kids out, you just quietly remove them and just tell them that you're going to put them in a private school and just quietly remove them. But you don't bring attention to yourself, and you don't challenge them, and you don't act defiant. Now, you look at the midwives in Egypt. So I'll read to you, and you can see there's two things that they did. They're very interesting. Now, I read you the first chapter of Exodus last time because I wanted you to know what was in it. And it was about the Pharaoh who it said knew not Joseph. The Pharaoh before that was favorable towards Joseph, and Joseph, the captive, helped that Pharaoh rescue the land from famine. Okay, so now here's what happened next. And so then that was when they put so many burdens on the Hebrews, because this Pharaoh was afraid that they were growing in number and that they would overwhelm them or take the side of an enemy. And so they put more and more work on them. And so then the second chapter is the birth of Moses. I want you to read something about the midwives, and then something very clever that was done by the mother and the sister of Moses. And we can do this. We can do this. Now a man from the house of Levi went and took as his wife a Levite woman. The woman conceived and bore a son, and when she saw that he was a fine child, she hid him for 3 months. When she could hide him no longer, she took for him a basket made of bulrushes and daubed it with bitumen and pitch. She put the child in it and placed it among the reeds by the river bank, and his sister stood at a distance to know what would be done to him. Now the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river. I have to preface this by saying that an edict had gone out by this king of Egypt, that all the Hebrew children were to be killed at birth. And so before this, the midwives were told, you shall not let them live. And but the midwives, let me just back up and start over and read this to you, okay? Then the king of Egypt said to the Hebrew midwives, one of whom was named Shiphrah and the other Puah, when you serve as a midwife to the Hebrew women and see them on the birth stool, if it is a son, you shall kill him, but if it is a daughter, she shall live. But the midwives feared God and did not do as the king of Egypt commanded them, but let the male children live. So the king of Egypt called the midwives and said to them, why have you done this and let the male children live? The midwives said to the Pharaoh, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, for they are vigorous and give birth before the midwife comes to them. So God dealt well with the midwives, and the people multiplied and grew very strong. And because the midwives feared God, he gave them families. Now, that's what the Hebrew says, families. In many versions of the Bible, it says houses. And I suppose it meant homes, because houses and homes were interactive as words were the same in the Bible. So this is very interesting how that they answered him. They feared God, so they did what would have been right, and that was to let the babies live. And they could have also waited until the Hebrew women had already birthed the baby before they showed up. But instead of saying to the king, well, we can't obey that, what you did, what you're doing is wrong. Now a lot of people want us to just, you people ought to just stand up for yourselves and take a stand and say this and say that and be defiant. But the thing is, if you're raising children, you don't want to get to be targeted, and you want to be really careful to protect yourself and your children, plus your ability to homeschool. You want to just be quiet and work quietly and lie low and don't make a stir. And you let somebody else fight the public school and the officials. And so what they said was, because the Hebrew women are not like the Egyptian women, and they give birth before the midwife even comes there, they could have said, what you're doing is wrong and we're not going to obey it, and just kind of stuck their nose up in the air and marched off. But they wouldn't have been alive to have houses, have the homes and the families God gave them. We have to think about what we're doing here. And so when people would tell me you're defiant because you're homeschooling, I would say, oh, no, I'm not defying anybody. I'm just obeying God. I'm doing what's best for my children and what I believe God told me in Deuteronomy 6 and Ephesians 6 to raise up and teach my own children. And I would give some other reasons, but the thing is, you can keep defiance out of it if you obey. You look at the Apostle Paul. He said we must obey God rather than man. But he always found a way around something. When the officials blocked him for doing something, he found a way around it. But he didn't get in the face of a lot of people and harm his ministry. And so now the birth of Moses comes, and they're hiding this baby because of this command that the male children would die. And his sister and his stood at a distance. And the daughter of Pharaoh came down to bathe at the river. When her young women walked beside the river, she saw the basket among the reeds, and sent her servant woman, and she took it. And she opened it and saw the child, and behold, the baby was crying. And she took pity on him and said, this is one of the Hebrews' children. Then the sister who was standing by, this is you and me. The sister who was standing by said to Pharaoh's daughter, shall I go and call you a nurse from the Hebrew woman to nurse the child for you? And the Pharaoh's daughter said to her, go. So the girl went and called the child's mother. And Pharaoh's daughter said, take this child away and nurse him for me, and I will give you your wages. So the mother of the child got paid for taking care of him from the government, in a way. But this is the opportunity that we've been given. So many people now are not returning to the public school who probably shouldn't be teaching our children anyway. And the mothers are teaching their own children. Now, what I would not advise them to allow the government to supply the materials or to pay them, because then they start making the rules, and you will get the materials that are not good. And I can prove that in many ways, but I won't take the time to do it right now. So look at the opportunity that we have to be like Moses' sister and mother, to guard our own children and grandchildren. And already I'm hearing of more and more grandmothers that are taking a major part in helping the children, their grandchildren, because everybody can use a little help, and it's very welcome if you have the same values as your children. So the challenge is to do God's will without becoming a target or attracting too much attention. You will attract enough attention just by what you don't do. So I just hope that I explained that well enough. I have hoped that we would come out on the other side of this feeling better. You will have your discouraging moments when you think of all the captives in the Bible and how they had a strong purpose. And so just because they were captive, all they had to do was change their method of getting to their goal. And it might have been a temporary thing, but you don't give up your goal and just sit there and say, well, I'm just going to wait till they let me out. I'm just going to wait till things change. There are so many things we can do now at home that are far better than the way we were used to do things. I believe there will be a lot of things that will change. In fact, I have met a couple of women who said they are not going back to work because, first of all, they're getting more done at home, and they were getting the amount of work that they were doing was able to be done at home on their computer, and they were getting it done in half the time because they were not having to suffer through the office antics and the schedule at work, being on a schedule, having to go from 9 to 5, and now they can get it done in half the time. And also, none of the office gossip and the toxic atmosphere. Some of them are not well lit, and some of them have bad air, and so they're staying home. And so things will change, I hope. Now, one of the things that we studied in that we did in our recent You Thrive class, it's just, I call it University of Thrive, and I have it for my grandchildren. And you can do one too. You don't have to do it on Zoom or on the screen. You can do it through correspondence course. Send them a little lesson that you write out on a pretty piece of paper, and send it to them. Give them a little something to fill out, or a chance to call you on the phone and tell you what they learned, or something to read aloud, or something to draw, or some of the little ones, something to color, a little story that you write, and you can do it via correspondence, which is quieter and doesn't take quite so much energy out of you. But one of the things that we discussed last time was this word countenance. And I had this old book here, and it's called The Christian Charm Course. There's also a counterpart for the boys, and called Man in Demand. And so what I wanted them to do was copy, because these books, you might not be able to get one copy for each person, and they are workbooks, and we don't want to fill them out because we might want to use them again, is I said I want you to do the first lesson, and the first lesson dealt with facial expression and talked about what's in the heart and how it comes out on the face. And I said I want you to study this part, these 2 pages. I'll look at the heart and the life, and how to understand the word countenance, and to look up the word countenance in the Bible. And I mentioned, for example, Cain, who had done wrong, or before he had done wrong, it said he was filled with wrath. He was wroth. He was angry. And God saw this. And this is before he had done anything. And he said, why are you angry? Will not your countenance be lifted up if you do well? And your countenance is the look on your face, the expression. People can't see our countenance anymore, can they? Because the government has covered it up. And I don't think that's right. And if you look up the word countenance, it's very important. It's how people communicate. And our ministry comes from our face. And he said, will not your countenance be lifted up if you do what is right? And so if you're feeling discouraged, I would suggest you do something that needs to be done, whether you like it or not, and you will find yourself feeling better. Your posture is better. In fact, this first lesson in the Christian Charm course was on posture. I came across this book when I was about 20 years old, back in the olden days. I stopped at a Christian bookstore. This isn't the original one. The original one is white with pink lettering, I think, and there is an old copy around here somewhere. And there was nothing offered for young single women like me. Like, there were no classes or anything, and even at church it was very lacking in classes for girls on refinement and on how to take care of yourself and how to behave and how to speak and these things that Esther went through. So I picked it up and brought it home, and I decided that every day there was no classes offered, and classes that were offered in the community were extremely expensive. It was like $60 for 2 or 3 classes, and at that time, back in the olden days, that's a lot of money. And so I decided to bring it home, and I would do 1 page a night and just be like I was in a class and give myself the lessons. Now, you probably have things around that that you could use to do something like this. Maybe you have this. Maybe you have this book, and it says in the advertisements when you're looking for it online that it's for teenagers. Look, it's for everybody. There's nothing in here that you couldn't learn. And you'll say, oh, I already know how to do this, or I already know how to do that. But one thing that's wrong with that kind of thinking is you won't put yourself through a course. You will, but if you put yourself through a course and do a page a day, I would copy it and just work on the copied page as a workbook so you can use this again. And just it's a self-improvement course. And if you say, well, I already know how to make introductions, or I already know how to stand up straight, go ahead and take the lessons, and every day just practice it and learn it like you're trying to pass a course, and do it anyway, even if you already know how. It will get your brain waves going, and you'll feel more logical. And especially women, we do tend to be more sensitive to stress. And these kind of things are a different kind of stress that's good. It's making you thrive. It's making your brain stronger. It's making your will and your resolve better. It's helping you to be aware of your flaws so that you can improve. And you'll lift your countenance up. Now, while I'm talking about that, I want to show you a couple of other books that maybe you have at home already that you could use. You could start a little three-ring notebook, and put the filler paper in. The new filler paper now has plastic holes along the edge so that it doesn't tear out. But I would buy plastic sleeves and stick it in there anyway if you're going to do anything to record what you're doing. And that's they have the American Girls Handy Book and the American Boys Handy Book. But in your country, South Africa, New Zealand, Australia, and England, there are counterparts to this, but they were written in the 1800s. They were called boys' books or girls' books. And so you could just, we had this in homeschooling, and I ordered myself a new copy because ours is just falling apart. And we didn't actually use it as lessons, but we just let the children go through the boys' book and the girls' book and pick out things they'd like to do. But now that I'm homeschooling, and I'm homeschooling you, I'm just going to start with chapter 1 and see if you want to do it. Now, some of it is a bit outlandish, and you might not want to do it. Back in the 1800s, they would make their own hammocks and things like that. I'm not sure I would be able to do that, but just at least read. See, they have Noah's Ark show. Make a show of a box of about 2.5 feet long and 1.5 feet high. Remove the top and both the end pieces, and then cut this and cut that and make a curtain, and then how to make the little ark and everything like that. Well, that would be interesting for me to do, just so I could know that I did it, so I knew how to do it. Sometimes we look at things and say, well, we don't need that. Well, I already know how to do that. But look at it as a class you're taking and force yourself to do it. Keep a notebook or a little box. Do everything in miniature so it doesn't take up much room. And you might have something like this that you could use. There are probably a lot of things in your collection at home that you can use. Now, this is something here that's recent that you could buy. I'm not real fond of National Geographic because it's gotten so political, but this was good. And Mr. S saw it at the grocery store the other day and brought it home for me. And of course, they use their favorite byword, sustainability. But it's a modern take on self-reliant living, and it was actually pretty good. So if you don't have any of this stuff, go to your grocery store or go online and get this one. It's from 2021, so it's just published. But I just wanted to go through it with you because you could use this as a course. And some of it's quite nice and very high quality pages. And the reason I'm saying this is I'm trying to say, let's go on to the other side of this, more self-reliant and less dependent on stuff out there, and quit outsourcing our lives. you can learn it. Now, it doesn't have personal things like this has personal things like how to do your hair, how to take care of yourself, and old-fashioned things, but it's worth knowing. And so this is about life at home. So the first chapter is Eat, how to make quick breads and yeast breads and sourdough breads. So I went through it. I decided I was going to do some things in this, and I started with the sourdough bread starter, working on that. Staples for your kitchen, how to dry herbs, canning at home, refrigerator foods, fermentation, and then chapter 2 is things to make. Sewing, just the basic little things of sewing. I had a little class for girls 8 years old one time, and I taught them how to sew a button and how to sew a seam, and they always went home with some little thing right from the class. They always had instant success, and that's what really excited them about sewing, is they could go home with a little bag, a little cushion, a little doll dress, a skirt. Actually, we sewed a skirt by hand once, very, very quickly, so that by the time the class was over, they went in the bathroom and changed into their skirt and wore it home. So success is what will make. I don't like big projects if I'm trying to get people interested. And these aren't big projects. You could just sew one little thing that they have in here. So the sewing is patchwork and quilting, beeswax wraps. I actually looked into that and read that chapter. It's a way of dipping cloth into melted beeswax and making wax paper, which you use over and over again, and then you just put it on a cookie sheet and then reheat it in the oven, and so that it's soft and pliable again, and all the cracks are gone, and using it again. Basket making, leather work, and natural dyes. And then chapter 3 is about cleaning, soap making, skincare. They had a hand lotion bar, which is a lot less messy than hand lotion. And then medicinal herbs, herbalism. When I grow up, I want to be a herbalist. I might amount to something someday, but that herbalism is what I'd be interested in. Natural remedies, cleaning and laundry. And as you know, I've quit using commercial soaps and detergents and started using vinegar. Okay, things to grow, planning a garden. I know that even on, I think it's Victorian Trading Company, they have a little garden planner book reproduced from the 1800s. And it's just the most darling little thing. And young girls and boys also would you could make one. Once you saw one, you could make one. And the drawing it out and the grid and where things are going to go, just drawing the garden first. It's just such an adventure for children and for you too. It's not too late for you to do something. Growing from seed, vertical gardening, natural weed control. Yeah, how would you like to not have to use pesticides? Composting, pollinators, sprouts, and microgreens. So this is called Simple Sustainability, National Geographic, and I will post a picture of that for you. And then the other thing that I wanted to show you, I know you should be working and not looking, but I wanted to show you this. Have on a previous post put it Cottage Core, and it's by Daisy Oakley. And someone had sent me a video on Cottage Core, and I thought it was very interesting because it was like we just used homemade things and things we had used things that other people had given us, and created our own look at home. And we even everybody dressed a little differently because they came from a different homestead, and they're depended on what their father and mother had and what their capabilities were. And so this is called Cottage Core. So I got to looking through it and thought, I think I'll just use this as my course. And I'm going to go through it and do everything. And it's done in the seasons. So it starts in spring, but you could, skip over to autumn if you wanted to. And here are some of the things that you can do in the spring. And I think that it would be worth having a notebook and going through this. Creative ways to set a table. Does anyone know how to set a table anymore? And another one is collecting rocks. Like I told you, those women had that when we went up to their tea party. How to set a table, and also how to make a bunting, and then it suggests to go for a walk. And so you could do all these things. You could make your own how-to book in a way. That was one of the things that was suggested in our Thrive class, was that we make how-to books. How to do this. Some little thing that people think, oh, I already know how to do that. But describe it and list it and tell how to. You know, when your children are little, you do have to tell them how to see something, how to look at something, and how to analyze it and observe it. And so you can do this too. And then here's something about make your own olive soap. And you'd have to order a couple of things to do it if you wanted to do that. And then how to, just inspirations, you know, how to work with nature, how to make your own tea bags, and you have to sew that. But, you know, and how to make a roasted vegetable tart. Just all the senses are used here. And how to work with fresh flowers, how to make a lavender scent bag, how to make a lantern. These things, you might look through this and say, well, we already know how to do this, we already know how to do that. But it's always enjoyable to use it as a course and put yourself on some kind of a course, because if you were homeschooled or you homeschooled your children, well, maybe now it's your turn. So now I'm going to explain to you why I got into this. Is that as I have been more in captivity, I have observed something, and that is simple things like feeling the sun on my arm, that maybe I would be too busy to really well, I would notice it, you know, but it wouldn't really sink in too much. And I wouldn't have time to think about it because I'd be busy trying to catch up with a lot of things. And once I cut out that world out there and quit having to be in my car all the time, or having to go out and do errands and all that, and figured out different ways to get that done, I have noticed something, is that we start. And other people who are also in captivity have told me that they see life less through the glitter of the commercial world, and less through the we used to go to stores to get ideas. You know, sometimes we'd see new merchandise. We'd think, how could we work our homes to look more like that, even if we didn't buy anything? But now we're not doing that so much, and we see life less through the glitter of the commercial world, and more through the magnifying of God's creation. And we're no longer flooded with so many ideas and so much information, but now we're gathering peace and wisdom. And so I have an assignment for you, is to make something for yourself or your home. It doesn't have to be sewn. It can be something for your hair. It can be something on the table. It can be covering a book. It can be, just use whatever creative thoughts you have. So I think that there is, and I was watching this fellow who had bought a ghost town in, was it between Las Vegas and Los Angeles, and he bought this ghost town, and he's been there 14 months. I don't think always alone. He does have visitors, and he does have helpers, you know, to try to get this town going. But he did mention in one of his videos how he had got a stronger sense of purpose and more happiness by just removing himself from the pressures of the world. And doesn't mean that I don't approve of cities or commercial things or like that, but we're going in a different direction now. And I also have run across several young women who have gone to live in quietness and peace because they just couldn't. Some people just cannot take too much pressure, and there's no reason why we have to live under it. And I think that there's been a misconception, especially about women, who just really don't work well under a lot of stress and pressure, that, oh, they're not normal and there's something wrong with them. Maybe they should be on medication, or they should, you know, be analyzed as people who are deficient or anything like that. But that's not true. Not everybody is cut out for the 9-to-5 job. Not everybody's cut out for college. Not everybody's cut out for social pressures. And so we're finding this out, and I'm thrilled to know that young people are coming home too and learning to live with nature and with God and with the love of their families. And I remember in some of the homeschool stuff we had, how encouraging it was. And I remember my children studying this concept of where the Bible talks about, if you do God's will and you walk with the Lord, that 10 of you shall chase 1,000. And we dwelt on that. We talked about that, about the influence, because really what that means is the influence of one person on a lot more people, because of the way they live is so, it shines. And so the Bible also says, don't grow weary in well-doing, and tells us to be diligent. Now, there are some people who will say, I'm really tired of living at home and I don't like it here and I want to join this circus. And but the Bible says don't grow weary in well-doing. And so as homemakers, you'll find most of this is repetitive, but so is anything in the commercial work world, would all be repetitive anyway. But the way that I overcome that so that I don't grow weary in doing the dishes, cleaning the kitchen, preparing food, is I just create variety. I'll arrange things a little differently. I'll make sure that there's a variety in the type of dishes that I produce for the family to eat. I took the family on a train trip. We're about ready to go on a luxury ship cruise. And there's so much potential in the home. You can change your colors. You can change the way things look. In the olden days, they just bring in a bouquet of flowers, and that did it for them. But you don't have to grow weary in well-doing. And I used to teach my children, if you say, I'm bored, or you're saying, I'm growing weary in well-doing, and that's not good. So do something about your boredom. Change things out. Don't have the same routine. Work it back to front and front to back, and start doing the things that you would do last, do them first. There's so many different ways to change your routine, and there's no law or rule or anybody, there's no governor that come in and say you have to do it this way. And so don't grow weary in well-doing. The Bible also says to be diligent, and being diligent means a constant attention. Goodness, I don't have the definition right here, but let me see if I can do it from memory. Diligent means constant attention to a responsibility or a purpose, just without giving up. That's what diligence is. And so I want to read to you something that we did in our recent Thrive class. And you can start these classes yourself. Just tell your children or grandchildren something you know and dwell on it for a few minutes. And it doesn't have to be online either. I once wrote a letter to one of my grandchildren to talk about the people after the Tower of Babel and where they went. And I talked about the various places in the world that they settled. And you can find that out from the Bible itself. And so I wrote him a long letter about these people. And I want to read to you what we read. And I read a little bit of this to you before, but it's one of the ways to develop a set of values. Now, a set of values is like a scale, and it either goes down one side and up the other, or down one side. And what you want to do is balance your values with God's word. So when you have things like Philippians 4:8, how to think on things that are good, lovely, pure, and just. And then you have Galatians 5:22, the fruits of the Spirit, love, joy, peace. And then you want to go join the circus. You want to balance this out, and you want to remember purity and remember modesty, and you balance it with the Word of God. And that's what this scale is all about. I'll just reach over here and get my handy old scale here. So I was doing this and showing them this scale, and I put something here that was like a little tiny Bibles that would hold that down. And then if the thing they wanted to do did not balance with the Bible and did not have the same value, then they would say no. So one side of your brain is going to say yes or no, according to what the situation is. And everybody has a set of values, and it begins in youth. But you can retrain it. You can change it if you've been taught wrong. If your set of values will determine almost immediately whether something is acceptable or not, whether something is right or not, whether you're comfortable with something or not. And you should trust that. You should trust your instincts. I know, because people will try to talk you into something, and they'll say, well, there's nothing wrong with it, and there's nothing in the Bible says you can't. But if there's something that you instinctively feel that doesn't match up with your set of values, and everyone has a set of values. We used to have, in the olden days, a list, and I keep saying I'm going to try to find it and put it on the post for you. By the way, go to the post to listen to this video, because that's where I will add the pictures and the extra things and some of the verses and things like that. Well, this list kind of went like this, and I remember reading it way back in the 1950s. It would appear on church bulletins, and it was to determine whether I should do this or read this or think this or be a friend with this person or something. Whatever it was, would I want Christ to see me doing it? Would it be a bad influence on other people? Does it serve any worthwhile purpose in life, as far as, what I'm going to be doing in life, my role in life? Does it serve the home? Does it help? Is it wholesome? Does it develop good family values? Is it something that I would be proud of later on? And it was just a whole bunch of just common sense things to determine what we should or should not do. And sometimes people can think of some pretty bizarre things that they want to do. And is it really essential to anything? Would it be important in an emergency? So the most important thing, of course, is our character. And one of the things you have to be careful about, especially you who are being homeschooled by me, is not to brag that you were homeschooled, and that because one of the things that people started doing who had homeschooled their kids was saying, my child took a test and came in the top 10% percentile, of knowledge and brilliance, and so therefore homeschooling works, and this is wonderful. And then after that, they would say, well, I homeschooled all my children, and one got a job in a big corporation, and one got a scholarship for this, and one ended up being the head of some company or something. But here's the problem with all that, is that what if those things weren't there? Like right now, the jobs are all shut down in some places. So, of course, you don't have any bragging rights now, do you? So the most important thing that you can do is develop the character, because character is what's the most needed. And character comes from some of these verses I have read to you, where they learn things that build their inner self, so they can cope with things like captivity. So I'm going to read this to you and tell you, it's from 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 5 through 8. Very, very full. You could speak for hours on this. So I'm going to homeschool you, and I'm going to tell you about it. Okay? Because this is part of character building. So character is all you have. Let's say you lose your prestige in town, and you lose your prestige. Even in the church, you're no longer maybe an elder or a deacon or something. So what are you? You're what the substance of your character is, and that will take you through anything. So this is God's adding. You know, when you take, it's still different than numerical adding. If you take numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and you add them, you'll get an answer. But let's just play with them and switch them around and put the 5 on the top and the 1 at the bottom, and add them vertically again. You'll still get the same answer. That's math. But God's math is this: make every effort to add to your faith virtue. Now, faith, see the way they do this, you can't just, I'll just read it all to you. Make every effort to add to your faith virtue. The Greek says supplement or go alongside. And virtue and to virtue knowledge, and to knowledge self-control, and to self-control steadfastness, and to steadfastness godliness, and to godliness brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. For if these qualities are yours and are increasing, they keep you from being ineffective and unfruitful in the knowledge of our Lord Jesus Christ. And then in verse 10 it says, be all the more diligent to confirm your calling and election, for if you practice these qualities, you will never fall. So it says, giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue. We'll start with diligence, which means a persistent attention to a goal or a purpose, and without wavering. And then supplement or add to your faith virtue. Now, faith is your foundation. That's your reason for living, is you have this solid faith in Christ. And without that, you could get virtue. Virtue is the practice of goodness. You could be a good person. And it says, add to your virtue knowledge. You have knowledge. Why don't you just say, I want knowledge? Knowledge is easy, isn't it? That's what the public school is focusing on, is just knowledge. And then it says to knowledge, self-control. And so anyway, I will go through and talk about some of these things. Add to your faith virtue. It doesn't say virtue and then faith, but faith first. Faith is the foundation of all these things, and it produces virtue. So virtue is the practice of goodness or strength. You know, you can see a piece of furniture and say, what are the virtues of that furniture? Well, it has strong wood, and it's got a pleasing design to it, and it will withstand the test of time. So virtue means the practice of goodness, and it also is strength. So you add to your faith virtue. Now, virtue kind of grows out of faith, doesn't it? And then to virtue, you add knowledge. Now, why didn't it say knowledge first? Because you can teach a person to understand chemistry, for example, but you have to teach them how to use it in a moral and virtuous way. So knowledge is always second to the practice of goodness. You can't just, this is the problem. What we have in the world today is flooded with information and knowledge, but no virtue to go with it. And there's just so much of it, and we beg to know how to use it in a virtuous way. So add to your faith. Faith is first. That's your foundation. Virtue is the practice of goodness. And without faith, the practice of goodness doesn't have an anchor. It doesn't have a foundation, and can get very discouraged without your faith if you're just being good, because you don't have the same reason for it, and you can get very discouraged by failures and by rejection and things like that. And that's why faith is your anchor. You're going to be good anyway because of your faith. So add to your faith virtue, the practice of goodness and strength. And add to your virtue knowledge. So here comes knowledge, but it didn't come till after virtue. Things have to be done in this order. That's why this was written in this order. Giving all diligence, add to your faith virtue. It says supplement your faith virtue in the Greek. Supplement your faith with virtue. Then you supplement your virtue with knowledge. So it just comes alongside of virtue. Here comes knowledge, but there is more. Knowledge can be used better if you have the virtue first. You can remember this, the poem I'm always quoting to you: hurry the baby fast as you can, hurry him, worry him, make him a man, off with his baby food into his pants, feed him on brain food and make him advance. And fill his poor head full of figures and facts, keep on a jamming them in till it cracks. Well, there's no word in that poem about filling this child full of love and goodness. And if you have virtue, if you have love and goodness, the knowledge will come. And because your faith will produce it. And it's really hard. This is why it's such a poor teaching method in public schools and in colleges. It's such a poor teaching method because they force the facts and you have to memorize them, and then you have to pass tests and stuff. But it's not the same as when the knowledge is added to goodness and faith. Then it comes more easily. The knowledge is easy, much easier. And then add to your knowledge self-control. Now, I told you about self-control. On how to develop it would be to do things that were uncomfortable or you had to do because you have to. That develops a sense of self-control. And you think of a mother whose baby needs help or falls or something. She immediately drops everything and goes and helps him. And the thing is, I think a lot of people lack self-control because they haven't been taught how to do it. And I've suggested you make a list of things that you don't want to do that need to be done and start doing them even if you don't like it. And you'll find that your faith actually grows from that, and your self-confidence grows, and your resentment leaves because you're doing something. So add to your faith virtue, and to your virtue knowledge, and knowledge self-control, and to self-control steadfastness, and to steadfastness godliness, and godliness with brotherly affection, and brotherly affection with love. Look there, love is the cap over all of it, and that is a very big thing. And even 1 Corinthians 13 says you can have a lot of knowledge, but without love, it's just a bunch of noise. It's just a bunch of, what did they say, crashing cymbals and clanging brass or something like that. So, and it says here, if these are yours and are abounding or increasing. Abounding means more of, bigger than, overcoming. Abounding. They keep you from being ineffective and unfruitful. We talked a lot about fruitfulness and fruit trees, and how some trees don't bear fruit, and why, because they're lacking the nutrients, or they're not in good weather, or different things like that. It took quite a while. Everyone had something interesting to say about it. But here's your little formula. It's 2 Peter chapter 1, verses 5 through 10. And I love 10. For if you practice these qualities, you will never fall. And they do take a lot of practice. Ladies, I've been here for an hour, and I hope you got a lot done while you were listening, but I do have to go pretty soon. And I have all these notes that I haven't even read yet, so I'll have something for next time. And thank you all, the ones that support me. I know it's sacrificial. It's very, very helpful. And I hope you will leave a comment. I really appreciated that, having more comments next time. However, I don't insist on it because you'll just have to stop and do something online. And I hope this has been valuable to you, and I hope my speaker is working. And we'll see you next time. Bye.